Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. We're going to talk about tricks to setting up amazing learning spaces. I'm going to give a few minutes here to let a few more people join in. I see the numbers going up. Just a few little housekeeping rules. I recommend getting rid of any distractions that you might have right now because I'm going to be sharing lots of pictures and tips and advice and ways that you can really make your learning space more natural and fun and exciting. So if you have, Facebook open, go ahead and close that. The one distraction I would recommend not closing up is your children. You might even hear mine come running in at some point. I know that that's just part of life. So if your kids are running around, that's okay. But if you can get rid of any distractions that you can, it's a great way to help us get the most of our time together today. I would also recommend grabbing a pen and paper because, like I said, I'm going to be going pretty quickly through all of this. I tend to talk fast anyway. And in general, when we write things down, we're more likely to implement them right away. So, if we are watching a webinar and sort of think something's really cool, we might log that away in the back of our heads, but life gets busy and, we have children and things happen, and those things that we think about sort of just fade away. But if we write them down, we're more likely to go implement them immediately. So I definitely recommend taking a second to grab a pen and paper and have that available. And then the other thing I would ask you, if you notice, you should have access to a chat box there on the top left hand side of your screen. You should be able to click a little chat bubble and you can come over and join us over there. Depending on where you clicked in from, you might not be in the same chat box as others. So anytime a comment pops up, I will try to read it out loud so that we can all kind of engage together. But you should be able to engage in the chat box with whomever clicked in on the same spot as you. And I'll pop over there when I can to kind of engage there as well. And that's a good way that we can kind of communicate. I'll have a Q&A at the end. So if you have any questions, you can save those for at the end there. And also, so definitely recommend staying around till the end of the webinar. I'm going to take probably about an hour of your time today, and then we can all get the most out of our time together. And I definitely have something fun I want to share with you at the end, and then we'll also have that Q&A. So yeah, shut off the distractions, grab a pen and paper, and we're going to go ahead and get started. Let me click over here. So I'm going to start by introducing myself. I see a few names here in the attendees section there, so welcome. I also see some familiar names, so hello again. And if you don't know me, my name is Leah McDermott. That's me in the photos there. I am a mom, first of all. You can see my boys. Charlie is 4 and Desmond is 17 months. And we live on a small little urban homestead in Oregon in the Pacific Northwest. So we are a very outdoors and adventuresome family. And I am passionate about spending, I spend my time, and in my business, I help families and educators and anybody that has interaction with children. I help them set up nature full and engaging nature spaces for their children so that they can get their kids outside and get them excited about learning and really boost all of those natural benefits that we get from nature by getting their children engaged and with meaningful learning experiences with their children grounded in nature. So that's what I do. My journey to where I am now, it began many years ago before I was a mother. I was actually raised as a homeschooled child. My father was in the military, so we moved around a lot. So I was homeschooled, and then I've always been very passionate about learning and nature and knowledge. So I went to school to become a teacher. I got 2 master's degrees in education, and I got dual certified to teach elementary school and reading in all the grades as a reading specialist. And I got a job in an urban public school, kind of ready to, go in and change the world and bring nature to the kids. But I unfortunately became pretty quickly disheartened with the public school system because a lot of the individualization of education, which was something I'm very passionate about, sort of was put down. So it became more and more of a challenge for me to individualize my children's experiences because my class sizes kept getting bigger. And the push from the administration was to kind of automate everything. It was very test heavy, make everything exactly the same. And that became a big struggle for me because my personal beliefs about learning were that, child should learn on their own and should have a say in the learning that they do, and that they should be enveloped in nature. And that was very, very difficult to put together in a public school setting. So after I had my oldest son in 2011, I decided not to return to the classroom and to try to find another way to sort of bring this to people. The next year in 2012, I started a natural living blog where I shared with others sort of my family's journey towards going green and, being one with the nature. And as my son got older, I sort of naturally began sharing some of the activities that I was doing with him in our everyday life. And I had a lot of people really resonating with those kinds of posts more than anything that I was doing. People were wanting to see what I was doing with my son and, how I was engaging him with nature and bringing nature indoors into his everyday life. And then when I had my youngest son last spring, at that point, my oldest was almost 3. So we were really starting to do some more structured activities as he was entering like the preschool age. And I had already decided to homeschool him. So that's when I had more and more parents again asking me to please share those. That's what they wanted to see. They wanted to see the activities that I was doing with him. They wanted to learn how they could do that with their own children. So I put together kind of compiled everything that I had done, and I put together a program, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But through that discussion with the people that, my followers, through my blog followers and the people that were interested in my program, I got the idea to kind of build a community of people together and where we could kind of all share these ideas and support one another and, ask questions and come together to learn and grow with nature and our children. So I started a Facebook group, and I'm going to put the link there in the chat box for you. It's the Nature Inspired Learning Group. You can find us on Facebook by searching that way. The link is bit.ly/nature group. I'm going to put a link there in the chat box for you. You should be able to click right on over. It's a private group, so you'll have to request to join. But everybody is welcome there. It's a free group. We have almost 1,600 members, and it's growing every day. And it is just a fantastic place of people who, we have parents and grandparents and, caregivers and educators and school directors, all kinds of people sort of coming together to share this passion that we all have with getting our children outside and bringing the nature indoors to them and just sort of, reconnecting with the earth and bringing our children along for that ride. So definitely come and join us. That's a great space. But through that group, kind of back to how I got where I am with you today, we have, lots of great discussion coming up every day. And I started to notice a lot of the same questions coming up over and over again. So I really wanted to find a way to sort of answer those questions all at once. Oh, excuse my dogs. I wanted to answer all those questions at once and sort of have a place where everybody could come to answer that one question that kept coming up, or those few questions that kept coming up. So I got the idea to do some live webinars to be able to share these answers with you, and that's how we got here today. And one of the most common questions and threads that show up in this Facebook group of mine is, how can I set up a learning space or a playroom or a play space or a classroom? What can I do indoors and outside to set up something for my child that they can be engaged with nature all the time? And so that's where we are today. This is by far my most popular webinar, and I'm really happy to be sharing it with you now. So let's dive right in so I don't take up any more of your time. So again, grab that pen and paper if you have it, because I'm going to start hitting you with some ideas here. So to start with the basics, so what do you need to set up an engaging learning space? So the first thing that I want you to keep in mind is keep it simple, because when a child, when we think about what a child might want in a playroom, a lot of times, we think about, what Hollywood tells us, and we think about what Pinterest shows us, and we think that, a room just packed with toys is a child's dream. But the truth is that when a child walks into a room and it's just like an avalanche of things and objects and colors and toys, it's actually very overwhelming, and it can cause a child to kind of shut down because they don't know where to start, and it's just too much for the general child's attention span. So really what you want is to have a space that's not cluttered, it's very organized, and it's child friendly. So there shouldn't be so many things that your child can't really choose one thing. So you really want to cut down on the clutter. One of the things that I talk about I'm doing a nature challenge right now, or a nature hack challenge. I'm going to go ahead and put a link to that for you. It's not open right now. The group that I have, we're kind of working through it, but you can sign up to get on the wait list for the next time I run it. So I'm going to throw that in there for you. Right now we're working on like toy rotation and daily quiet boxes, and just, you really want to keep your space not cluttered, and open, that your child could, to the point where your child could kind of walk in and grab an activity and know where it goes. They could put it back on their own. Just so think simple. The next basic is that you want it to be as natural as possible. And that's one of the things that I really work with in my business, is helping people bring nature into their space. Because a lot of us, very few of us live in a place where we can be outside every day. I live in the Pacific Northwest, so a lot of the time of the year it's raining. And, we do go outside in the rain, but it does make it difficult. And the colder weather kind of drives us indoors. I have a lot of people who live in the South, and they are stuck inside because of the opposite reason. It's too hot, or you have, heavy winters, or whatever the reason. We can't be outside all the time every day. So while I do encourage you to set up an outdoor space, which is something I'm going to talk about again, later on in the webinar, but bringing nature into your indoor space is a fantastic way to still get all of those benefits that nature provides without having to be outside to get them. So start thinking about, bringing in as much natural light as possible, opening up those windows, using mirrors to reflect the light, bringing plant life into your space, using natural objects as play items. So using, natural loose parts like rocks and acorns and pine cones and seasonal type things, bringing those in and letting them let them be for imaginative play, as opposed to some of the more plastic type toys that you might already have. So bringing in as much of that natural element as possible really helps to provide those engaging learning experiences for your children. Next is, you want it to be open-ended. So, when you think about the toys that you might have in your child's learning space right now, how many of them truly promote free play and open-ended imagination? So think about that when you're setting up your space. If you have something that can only do or be one thing, you might want to think about maybe moving that out completely, or moving that into like more of a rotation system, so that the things that you have in your space are very open-ended and allow for free play. And then I do encourage you to have multiple spaces. I have that there under the open-ended. I'm going to talk about that in depth in a little bit, so I don't want to go too detailed there. But really thinking about the activities and the structure of your space, how it is, and leaving it as open-ended for free play as possible. The next thing there I have is simple, complex, super complex. And that is referring to the types of activities that you set up. We're going to talk about basic ways to set up your learning space, but I'm going to talk very briefly about the detailed activities, or the things that you're actually putting on the shelf for your child to engage with. So a simple activity, an example of that would be like a tray of sand. It's very simple. It's one thing, but it's still something that your child can use their imagination with. They can be, free to engage however they want. Maybe they're going to write their name in the sand with their finger. Maybe they're going to, pile it up or let it run through their fingers. So that would be a simple activity. Now, if I were to add one more thing to that, like a spoon or a paintbrush or a pencil, that becomes a complex activity, because I've now added something else, and it gives the child one more level of things that they can do with it. So now they can draw in it, they can transfer it, transfer the sand, draw in the sand with the pencil or the paintbrush. And now that's a complex activity. Now, if I were to add one more thing, say a bin of toy animals or a small bowl of water, now it's a super complex activity, because there's now, those three things brought together now open up the play realm and the imagination capabilities, to an unlimited potential. So when you think about creating activities for your child and opening up spaces, try to think about bringing in as many super complex activities as you can. Obviously, you want to have all three of those represented in your space, but the more super complex activities you set up, the more engaging your space is going to be for your child. So just something to think about there. The next is that you want your learning space to be rich in experience. And again, you have to sort of think outside the box here. Rich in experience does not mean a whole bunch of stuff. Rich in experience means that they have access to flexible materials. Now, an example of a not flexible or an inflexible material would be a jigsaw puzzle, because there's only one way that a jigsaw puzzle can go together, right? It's either wrong or it's right. Now, I'm not saying that there's not a place for jigsaw puzzles. My son spent probably 25, 30 minutes this morning working on puzzles. He loves puzzles, but those are not things that he has access to all the time. I have those put away in a closet part of my rotation system. And I bring those out every now and then for him to do when he's, when he needs something to do, or we need a change, or we need some quiet time. I rotate those things out. But those are not materials that I keep out all the time because they don't promote imaginative play. They don't promote creative thinking. They're not flexible. So in the space that we have available all the time is flexible materials. So bringing in those natural loose parts, thinking about those objects or those toys that really help your child to use their imagination and to play and to engage and to have an experience. So thinking about what you have in your space as being a rich experience place. And then the final basic here is personal spaces. And a little bit earlier, I recommended or I mentioned having multiple spaces available for your child. And what I mean by that is that, I don't necessarily mean like multiple rooms. And, you should not be limited by the space that you have. So, some of us joining today might have a huge open playroom for our children. Some might have a classroom, and some might be living in an apartment where they only have, the shared family space, and that's fine. And I'm going to show you some photos of how others have overcome that. And you can still provide an engaging learning experience for your child, no matter the size of your space. But I really recommend trying to find multiple spaces that you can set up for your child. Obviously, I'm going to talk about indoor versus outdoor, and that is more than one space there. But one thing I also recommend adding, separate from where your child is going to be doing most of their learning and their work and their play, I recommend having a personal quiet space. And you can be creative there depending on how you put that in. The way that we've done that in my home is in the room where the learning space, which is a separate room in our home. We took the door off of the closet and we hung, some pretty sheer curtains and twinkly lights, and we put pillows and favorite blankets and loveys on the floor, and we have a basket that we change out daily with some quiet time activities. And that's a space that my son can go anytime when he's feeling overwhelmed or just tired or angry or stressed. He knows that that is a personal space. It's his. It's specifically for him to go whenever he needs that time. And we're setting up those healthy behaviors of taking that time to care for ourselves. And everybody could benefit from something like this, but most of the people that I work with in my business have children of younger ages. So between 18 months and 7 or 8 years old. And in general, that time is such an emotionally trying time for children because their brains are developing very rapidly. There's new information coming at them all the time that they're learning, and their bodies are developing very rapidly. So they're growing and they're able to do things, and they're learning all the time, and they're growing all the time. But a child's emotional development does not happen as rapidly as their mental development and their physical development. So we come in, that's when we come into this struggle of having so many emotional problems. We have tantrums and meltdowns, all those words that we put on those emotional outbursts. But truthfully, it's simply because their emotional habits are not developing as quickly as their bodies and their minds. So giving them a space where they can feel safe and comfortable and calm down is a really, really good idea. So whether you have a totally separate space for that, or even just, maybe you integrate it into your living room and you have just like a beanbag chair with a small something comfortable for your child, and they know that that's their space. However you implement that, that's definitely something that I recommend including to kind of combat that or help deal with those emotional struggles that a child might have or will have during that time of their lives. So moving on now and getting a little bit more specific here, I want to show you some inspiration photos for indoor spaces, because that's what I've been talking about here for the last 15 minutes or so. So all of these pictures either came from my space or they came from people who are in my private Facebook group. And again, that's the first link that I gave you in the chat box. And these are the kinds of things that we're sharing all the time. Again, so come and join us. And then again, that second link I gave you was the Nature Hack Challenge that I run. Like I said, you'd have to get on the wait list for that right now. And I wish I had some photos to kind of share with you what we're doing in there, but we'll get to that. If you get on the wait list, you'll see them. But anyway, so on the far left here, you see an example of how the child's learning space has been integrated with the family space. And I really love this photo because obviously you can see we've got the child napping right there. It's a space that is comfortable and calming for them to be in. But I love that the parents have included the child's work as a part of the family space. So you see the parents, they painted Jack and Abby's fine art gallery up on the wall, and they have a space there that's right there for any visitor or anybody coming into the home to see. And that really helps the child to feel like they have ownership of that space too. You know, they're not just like taking residence in the parents' house. You know, they really have, it's their home too, and their art is loved and worth showing off. So I really love this photo because it really helps to show that integration of the family space together. But you can see right there inside the family space, they have the shelves there, some artwork. They have a table set up there for the child to do their work right there where the family is sitting and, you know, living together. So it doesn't have to be a completely separate space. It's totally feasible to set up something in a very small apartment, just that tiny little area that you can give to your child that they feel is theirs to learn and engage. The second picture there is an example of a quiet space. This was actually the first quiet space that we set up for my oldest son when he was about 15 or 16 months old. And this was just something that we wanted to have available so that he could kind of get used to having that idea. Sometimes he would just sit there and we'd read together, or he would, you know, take a nap there sometimes. But this was a really simple thing that we did. We put a little crib mattress on the floor, some pillows and blankets and loveys, and then we hung from a hula hoop. We suspended from the ceiling with a sheer curtain and some twinkly lights, just to kind of give that a nice, soft, you know, calming space for him. So there's an example of how you could maybe integrate that into any other space. The photo kind of in the middle there is an example, another one pulled from my private Facebook group there. And this is an example, excuse me, of a nature table, which is definitely something I recommend having in your indoor learning space. And this is, you know, I talk about this more in my Nature Hack Challenge, and I have some other webinars that are more detailed about bringing the nature indoors. But here you see an example. They were studying bugs at this time. So the bug theme from the program that I have that I'll talk about later. But she has, you know, pictures of bugs strung up on the wall. It's a very inviting space. There's plant life. There's animal life right there. They're watching bugs in their space. You know, it's just very simple and, you know, calmly decorated, and it's, you know, it's thematic based on what they're learning at the time. And this is really just a fantastic space for a child to feel welcoming, and they can be engaged, but they're not overwhelmed. There's not a whole bunch of stuff right there. You know, it's not too much. It's just a great place to want to sit down and, you know, explore and engage and create. So there's an example of one way you can do that. On the top right there, here's an example that's pulled from a classroom, and what I really like about this space, this is obviously like a light table where they have the loose parts kind of set out on the table, but I really love that this table is down low at the child's level, and I love that they've taken chairs away, because many young children do not learn well when they are sitting in a chair or when they are being, you know, forced to sit still. A child learns best when their bodies can move. That's how they absorb information. So having that, you know, taking away that constraint and having that flexibility there for the child to sort of walk up and stand if they need to, or they can kneel, or there's a pillow there, you know, kind of inviting them to take a seat if they would like to. But this, I love this photo just because of that reason, that it kind of allows that flexibility for the child to learn and move at the same time, because that's a great way to facilitate that creative movement and creative learning. The bottom photo on the right there is an example of what I was talking about earlier when I talk about simple, complex, and super complex activities. So this is my son in one of his spaces, and this is an example of the salt tray. So this was a cinnamon salt tray. We mixed some cinnamon and fall spices. This was during, we were studying autumn and trees. And so it started with just the tray of sand, and you can see in his hand he has a paintbrush, so he was writing. He was very, very engaged with learning letters at this point. So then the extra pieces to make it a super complex activity, what I added were some of his letter toys. And then it became a super complex activity because he could, you can see in this photo, he's practicing writing the letters with the paintbrush, but he would also put them in the sand and he'd bury them in the salt, and find them, or he'd trace around them, or, manipulate them in the salt. So it just really opens up that world of creative thinking when you make a super complex activity set up for them. And this is very, very simple. It's just a tray of salt and a paintbrush and some letters. So really thinking outside of that sort of toy thought and bringing a lot of those natural elements in can really help change a space dramatically. So now I want to kind of shift gears and talk about outdoor learning spaces for the rest of the webinar here. Excuse me. And the three things that are kind of essential for every outdoor learning space, no matter what size space you have, this kind of is across the board, whether you're on just an apartment balcony or a basic backyard, or if you're on 20 acres of land, these three things are really kind of crucial to create an engaging learning space outdoors. So the first one is plant life. So that might be a vegetable garden, maybe flowers, it could be a patch of weeds, it could be herbs that you're growing in pots, it could be flowers that your child's growing, it could be succulents, whatever. Giving your child access to plant life is a really excellent way for them to interact with nature every day. Now, I did talk about bringing plants indoors, and I definitely recommend doing that, but having access outdoors for the child is also very, very important. And by access, I really do mean trying to have a space where they can have total free access. So they could go in and they can, tear the plants out of the ground, or they can cut them with scissors, and it won't be a problem. So maybe depending on your child's age, you might not want them to have full access to the vegetable garden, for example, the family garden. This year, my son's almost 4.5, and this is the first year that we've actually allowed him to have his own access to the vegetable garden, without supervision, because he's learned enough that we can trust him to kind of, use that space appropriately. But before that, and now with my youngest son, that's not really a space where they can have free access. So what we tend to do is we give them, their own plants. So we might plant things in recycled containers, quick growing herbs and flowers. And one thing that was really easy for us to do, and I'll show you in a photo in a little bit, was to kind of let a small patch of weeds and grass get a little bit overgrown. And if you're careful about it, it can totally look okay. But it's a space that I didn't have to worry about my child, cutting the flowers or, exploring and ripping up roots to investigate them. But when a child has that free access, amazing things can happen. And I'll show you again, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about when I show you the photo in a minute. So plant life is something that you must have for your child. The second one is water. And I know that might sound like a muddy mess here, but having access to water in an outdoor space is really crucial because it's an easy space. It doesn't have to be indoors. And using water is, there's so much creative thinking that can happen there because they're mixing it with their loose parts. They can water plants, they can splash around, they can pour and scoop, but a lot of developmental activities happen when you're playing with water. And it's really not always feasible to do that inside unless you're in, a bathtub or a sink. So setting that up in an outdoor space where the cleanup is easy and where it doesn't really matter if they're making a mess, that's a really crucial part of an outdoor space. And then the last thing would be loose parts. And again, we talked about having that indoors, that would be like your blocks or any kind of those flexible objects that I mentioned. But outdoors, you really want to bring in as many of those natural elements as you can. And I do, again, recommend bringing those indoors when you can. But having them outdoors is so much easier. So having access to those natural loose parts that can be manipulated and poured and transferred and scooped, things like rocks or, log rounds, sticks, twigs, pine cones, branches, acorns, flowers, whatever, all of those natural elements that can be used as loose parts are really integral to an outdoor learning space. And then, of course, you want to provide those utensils and containers as well so that your child can, scoop, pour, transfer, build, mix and crush. So you really want to just sort of provide as much of a flexible, open-ended environment as you can there. So now for some inspiration photos, I have a lot of them here that I want to share for you. On the left there is somebody again from my Facebook group, and this is a corner of their backyard where they have a teepee set up. And this is something that's actually really simple to do. There's a variety of materials that you can use. You could set it up completely for free. I'll show you how we did ours in a minute. This is, I believe they used some bamboo and willow branches that had fallen. So, just sort of structured that up there, and it's a great space for the child to go inside and create and imagine, kind of escape from, harsher weather conditions, but a great imaginative space there and something that's very easy to set up in an outdoor space. The second photo is the picture I was talking about with my son. So this was an area of our outdoor space where we had some like wild Queen Anne's lace that would grow over. And it is weeds, truthfully, but to a child, it was a field of flowers or whatever he was imagining that day. And in this photo, he's actually using scissors to cut down some flowers. If I remember correctly, during this picture, this was actually at our old home. We recently moved, but he was cutting flowers, I think, to create something in his outdoor kitchen. He was mashing them up with a mortar and pestle, I think. But I had a mother tell me after one of these webinars that her child was very, very resistant to using scissors on any kind of project. The daughter did not want to, she couldn't grasp them. She didn't understand using them. She didn't want to even try. But then the mother, after watching this webinar, tried taking scissors outside, and the child had a completely different mindset. They were excited about cutting down the flowers, and she spent like 20 minutes just cutting flowers with these scissors, and it totally changed the thought process that the child was having about using scissors by introducing them in a natural element. So, having this patch of weeds here for my son, it didn't matter to me what he did with them because it was just overgrown weeds, but it was a great space for him to kind of play and imagine and engage with that plant life in his outdoor space. So that's the photo that I wanted to share with you there to sort of help you think outside the box with that a little bit. The next picture there is sort of an example of a man-made thing that I brought into my space. This was the entrance from the back door of my home into my child's outdoor space, just sort of a welcoming, inviting, colorful, element into the space. It was just some cement blocks from a hardware store that I painted and added numbers on, like a little hopscotch. So that's just a fun little thing that I like to share there. On the top photo there, you see an upcycled pallet table that somebody from my group made for her daughter. And then they put an old pallet up on some legs and then cut 2 holes in it and put some bins to act as a water table and a sensory bin. So this gives that child access to those loose parts and the water as well. So it's a great place to kind of contain that, but also allow the child free access to that water to make a mess and play and learn right there. Some more photos here. I love to share this picture on the left. This comes from a website that I like to follow. But this is just a great example of being able to bring all of those elements in and not have to spend a penny. This does not have to be an expensive project. It doesn't have to look like Pinterest. I really am encouraging you here to look at the space that you have now and see if you can look at it from a very simple, child-friendly perspective. And just if you think about those 3 basic elements, the plant life, the water, and the loose parts, what can you create and bring to the space you already have to create that engaging play for your child, and just start somewhere. But here, again, you just see it's like a space in the yard where they have plants. You can see the hose there, so they've given the child access to water, and they just put some, like a scrap of wood on top of some cinder blocks that they built up, and some recycled, mom and dad's old pots and pans and cups and spoons. What a great place for a child to go explore, and that probably didn't cost anything to put together. You can see an example of my play space from our old home in the second photo there. And one of the biggest challenges with setting up an outdoor space tends to be storage of the loose parts. And the way that we combated that problem specifically was trying to have specific spaces for them. So you can see we have for rocks, my children love playing with rocks, so I really wanted to incorporate those as loose parts. So instead of having to worry about them being strewn all over the yard or having to store them somewhere, we sectioned off an area of the yard and made it a rock pit. So all I did was just kind of we had some old fence posts that we cut down and lined the space with some larger rocks, and I laid a tarp under it with a small layer of sand, and then I just bought like bags of pond pebbles from the hardware store. I think they were like $4 a bag, so this whole project cost less than $20. And I just bought 3 or 4 of those bags, and we poured the sand or the pond pebbles right there, and then my children would gather rocks from other places as well and incorporate those in. But it was a great place to kind of have those loose parts right there in their own storage space that I didn't have to worry about cleaning up later. And if you look a little further back into the photo, you can see we had some bigger tree stumps there that worked as like tables. In the tractor tire, that was actually our sandbox. So we upcycled a tractor tire, and we let my son pick out a color to paint it. We painted it together, and then we filled it with sand. And I have had a lot of questions about how we kept critters out of it. And my solution to that was, if you look back against that brick shed, you can see the piece of wood propped up. It was a heavy piece of plywood that we cut to cover completely, to cover that hole. So, at the evening when we were done with play, we would just plop that piece of wood on top of the sandbox, and we never had an issue with anything other than like bugs and a couple of spiders. So, no, we didn't have any, stray cats using it for litter boxes or any other kind of critters digging and living in the sandbox, because there was a really heavy piece of wood on top covering the hole. But then, so that I didn't want to just have a big piece of wood sitting outside, so what I did was I painted the backside of that plywood with chalkboard paint, so that during the day when that was propped up against the shed, it was an outdoor chalkboard. But then at night we could just plop it on top of that sandbox. So it kind of was a dual purpose thing there. You can see the little white tray, or the white toy box in the back, we kind of used for other loose part storage, like pine cones and acorns and things like that, to kind of separate them. But I just wanted to share that with you. That photo is a good angle to kind of show you a lot of what we did in our outdoor space. And the top photo there is an example of another upcycled pallet kitchen. This is somebody from my Facebook group, and I love the little natural space she has set up for her daughter there. She has plants there, that are kind of growing from the ground, but then also in potted plants that the child has access to, tools and utensils and natural loose parts and access to water. So everything that's needed right there in that fantastic little corner of their yard. And I like to share the bottom photo because this was actually somebody shared this photo with me right after joining this webinar, the same webinar. She was inspired by a space that she had in her yard that she wasn't really sure what she was going to do with, but having the inspiration from this webinar to kind of just look at a space that you already have and not think so big, and just think of, small and simple and child-friendly, what she could do. And she went right out with her son immediately and started creating. So, and you can see already that this was going to be a fantastic space. She's got the rocks to the side there, plant life. There was an old table that she had taken glass out of that she was going to turn into a water sensory table, so that he would have access to that water right there. So just a really, looking right away at what they have, not having to worry about spending money or waiting for a specific project, but just seeing what they could do right away. And then one more round of inspiration photos I want to share with you here. An example of something else you could do with a teepee on the bottom there is, this is not my photo, but this is pretty much exactly what we did with our teepee. We used, I think they used bamboo here, but we used some fallen tree limbs, and just kind of dug those into the ground a little bit, tied them up together. And in the beginning of the spring, we would plant peas and beans at the base of each of the teepee poles, so that by summer, late spring, early summer, the teepee was covered in vines that had beans and peas on them. So it was a really great, kind of a learning experience. It got the child engaged with growing their own food, but it also provided that natural teepee to the space. And if you look in the next photo there, on the far right of that photo, you can see the teepee poles back there. This shed is actually from like the backside of that shed from the earlier photo that I showed you. So back there is where we kept the teepee, and you can see at the base of the teepee, this photo was taken in early spring or mid-spring, I guess, and you can see the sprouts starting to grow up right there at the base of those teepee poles. So a month from when this photo was taken, that whole teepee would have looked like that bottom photo there, all grown up with vines. But this is also, I wanted to share this photo with you because this is where we kept my child's access to water. So we propped up a rain barrel there at the base of that shed, and we inserted a spigot onto it so that he could, have the free access to that water. And he could open and close that spigot on his own. You can see him right there. He's letting some of it run on the ground. He's making a muddy mess and just really learning and exploring there. He's obviously had moved some rocks over there for some reason, and he had his watering can. He must have been moving water back, but really just those few simple things make for such an engaging space for the child. Very, very imaginative. This top photo, I like to share this little photo series here. Another example of somebody who immediately after watching this webinar thought, oh, hey, I have this space in the backyard. What can I do with it? And I really love to share these photos because this mom told me that she never would have thought that her son would have liked to get dirty, that he wasn't going to engage in an outdoor space very much. And you can see, she, after watching this webinar, had some inspiration, went out and experimented a little bit, and clearly he very much enjoyed playing in the mud and scooping and pouring and digging. And she said he spent, I think, half an hour there just getting dirty and playing and exploring. And, I love sharing that photo because it really speaks to, as adults, we might have these biases about getting dirty or, just engaging with nature, but to our children, we owe it to them to give them a chance to kind of explore that on their own. So I love sharing that photo there. And then on the bottom, these series of photos are an example of somebody also from one of my groups who, she doesn't have a backyard. She doesn't have a big space. She has an apartment balcony, but yet she still has provided her son with all three of those elements so that he can have just as engaging of an opportunity outside as my son on the left and the child on the top there. And, he has water right there to pour and scoop. He has plant life and sunlight and loose parts, and his art easel is out there. So even in a very small space, you can still provide an enriching experience for your child just by create a little bit of creative thinking and incorporating those three elements: the plants, the water, and the loose parts. And then one thing I love to throw in here, this is a totally new topic all on its own, but I like to kind of toss it in because it's something I'm very interested in. Colors incorporated into a space actually play a huge role in the way a space feels. So maybe you just want to jot this down just for further research or further thought. This is something I want to delve into a little bit more. But the color of a space and colors in a space can actually activate certain areas of the brain to kind of help you learn specific things, or to, they activate areas of the brain that sort of manipulate or move different parts of the body, if that makes sense. So I just want to toss this in to help you maybe think about, when you're decorating, specifically an indoor space, some ways that you can use color to kind of enhance the way that your child is learning. So for example, very vibrant colors like fire truck red and yellow and magenta, those activate gross motor areas of the brain. So anywhere where your child is doing like big building or, playing with balls or anything that's a very active space, if you use colors like red and yellow and magenta, you're actually enhancing the way that your child is learning by incorporating those colors, because seeing those colors in their space is going to activate those parts of their brain. Same goes for hands-on work like an art space or, puzzles or games. Using soothing blues and greens in the space will activate those areas of hands-on manipulative thought in the brain. And then likewise, in a space that's very calming, like those personal spaces that we talked about, or anytime that the child needs to be concentrating, so like a reading space, or a intensive learning space, using whites or really light pastel colors are a great way to kind of activate those very concentration and calm areas of the brain. So it's just something I love to throw out there because it's very interesting to me. And then just to kind of sum up here, remember, it really, again, I want to emphasize, it is not about the size of the space that you have or, the Pinterest quality of your decorations. It's about the learning experience that you provide for your individual child. And in very simple terms, you just want to give your child a space where they feel it's uniquely theirs. Your space is not going to look like mine, and my space isn't going to look like someone else's, because we're all tailoring our learning spaces to meet the needs of the individual children that are in them. So it's really about, knowing your child and their strengths and weaknesses and their learning styles and their interests, and bringing that in a very simple and natural, uncluttered kind of way for your child, and providing them with those rich experiences. And really the best way you can do that is to let your child have a hand in putting the space together. So, if your child is a little bit older, basically once they're 2 or 3, they kind of have that independent thought, and let them help you put it together, because then they really feel like it's uniquely their space, and it helps them have ownership of it. It helps them keep it organized later on when you're working on cleanup skills. And, it helps them to feel a lot more engaged in the space if they had a hand in putting it together. And then, finally, really, you just want to set up your child with a space indoors and outdoors where you can provide those open-ended learning activities with nature. And you really want to think about having structured activities that you can set up for them that allow them the freedom to be flexible and manipulate their learning in a way that makes the most sense to them. So, now I want to bring it back to, at the very beginning, I talked to you about the program that I put together for my followers who had been asking me over and over to share what I was doing with my son. And back in March, I compiled all of that together, and I put something out there to kind of test the waters. And it was a fully formed curriculum program, all based in nature for that pre-K and K age. And I put it out there. I wanted to see what people thought, and I got back an overwhelmingly positive response. So at the beginning of this last month here in September, I put together, I kind of pulled all of that feedback that I had gotten, and I rearranged the activities, and I added a whole bunch to it, and I re-released the program, and it's available to you now. And I just wanted to take a few minutes to share that with you, because it really goes along with everything that we've talked about today, and setting up those engaging learning experiences for your children, kind of grounded in nature. So what you get with this program is, 20 themes, all based around nature. So you get like all of the 4 seasons, birds, bugs, space, light, colors in nature, garden spaces, plant life, what are the other ones? Rainforest animals, ocean life. So basically any question that your child might have about nature, or any interest that they might have grounded in nature, there's a theme in this program for them. And then inside each of those 20 themes is 25 unique activities that help you provide those open-ended experiences for your child to explore those themes in a way that is open-ended and child-friendly, and all of those things that I talked about today, allowing your child the flexibility to explore these ideas and concepts on their own. So you get nature explorations, which are ways that you can explore the area around you based on the theme that you're studying. So obviously, I have like an Arctic theme. Obviously, none of us live in the Arctic, but I give you ways that you can explore your own nature around you in a way that ties it back to that theme, to help your child make those natural world connections. There's art activities using nature, math extensions, so sort of building those early learning blocks for math, but using nature to do it as a really concrete way for your child to understand those basic concepts. I have sensory play, which is a fantastic thing to introduce in those outdoor spaces that I talked about today. Science experiments, of course, because there's no better way to learn how nature goes together than by taking it apart. I have themed book lists. One of my passions is early childhood literacy skills, and I do not believe that you do that by drilling sound recognition and phonics into your child. I believe that a child learns to love reading by reading things, by being read to, and by engaging with literature in a meaningful way. So the way that I help you do that is by providing a list of books that are my top 10 favorite for each of these themes, to help extend that understanding and that joy about nature into your child's everyday reading experiences. I give you some literature focused lessons, which are just some specific ways that you can change the way that you read or talk to your child about reading, and during reading, talk about the story, to kind of build those early literacy building blocks without structuring it like a reading exercise. It's just sort of a way that you can change the way that you're talking and reading to your child to help them build those skills, and they don't even know that they're doing it. And one of my other passions is healthy child eating habits. We have an obesity and child disease epidemic in this country, and or in America, and it's frightening to me. So, studies have shown that when a child has access to growing their own food and creating their own food, that they build those healthy eating habits, and they actually last with them for the rest of their lives. So one of the things I showed you today was kind of growing beans on a teepee. That was a really simple, fun, engaging way for me to have my child interact with nature. But really what he was doing is interacting with his food. And, he would eat those beans and peas, and we would use them in the food that we made. So he was building those healthy eating habits by having fun, and those habits will stay with him for the rest of his life. So one of the things I included inside each of these themes is a recipe that's thematic. It's healthy, no sugar, no food dyes. And it's a way for your child to engage. It's something that they can help you create. And it's a way for them to engage with their food and build those healthy eating habit blocks early on. More specifically, you get lifetime access to this program. When you purchase it, you get a download link right away, so you can download it. You can print it if you wanted, but you also have access to it via a cloud device forever. So you don't have to take up space on your computer. You don't have to print. You can pull it up at any point with the link that you get. You can pull it up on your phone, on your tablet, on your computer, whatever, to be able to access those documents at any time. There's more than enough in here for a full year of activities. It ends up being right around or over 500 activities total. So you could do a different thing every single day for like a year and a half. You never run out of activities here. But it's set up so that the themes do not have to build off of each other. They can be totally independent, so that you can use them, sort of whenever your child shows an interest. Okay, I see a comment here. You talk about theme, but Reggio does not like themes. I'm going to come back to that because I'm going to challenge your thoughts on that, actually. And it's not really themes the way that you think about them. But I will come back to that in the question and answer. Thank you for asking that. And I do want to address that point with you. But just real quick here to share with you what you get in this program. And then you get a how-to instructional guide as well. That it's just sort of all of these thoughts that I had about, interacting with nature and how to use this program, how to set up a learning space, like we talked about today, safety tips in nature, making plans, just this 10-page guide that comes along with the program. Just a little peek inside here. This is from the Rocks theme portion. So you have over there on the left, you see the list of books that I include for this theme, and then the literature lesson there, just kind of ways that I encourage you to read with your child. The center there is nature exploration. So these are some examples of how I help you bring, your own space into what you're studying with your child. And then the science experiments page over there on the left, you see I give you very, very detailed explanations on how you can implement these activities with your children, anytime that it's beneficial for you. And really what I wanted to do here was set you up with activities that you could do anytime your child was interested in this, so that you didn't have to go out and buy a whole bunch of other materials. You invest in the program and then that's it. Everything that you need in here, other than, the books, which they don't have to be part of this program. You can get them at your library. You can get other things that match what your child's interested in. But really everything that you need should be in nature, in a basic kitchen or art space setup. You really don't have to go out and buy or invest in a whole bunch of other things. I wanted it to be available for you to access at any time. And then I also have a whole bunch of bonuses that I'm incorporating with it right now. If you purchase now, you get all of these bonuses. So you get access to a private Facebook group. This is different from the free group that I mentioned at the beginning. That's for anybody to come in and enjoy. But here, this is a group only for people who've purchased the program. And this is a space where we share, some of the things that we've been doing with the program. We have, everybody in there. That thread is constantly moving, the people sharing photos and other great ways that they've extended their child's learning and understanding. And I'm in there daily to kind of provide support as well. So you get access to that amazing, amazing group. I'm putting together a video training series right now. I'm working on something like that is a lot like this webinar today, but it'll be something that you have access to all the time to kind of answer a lot of those questions that I see popping up and over again, sort of like a little video training series that you have free access to anytime. I have 3 new ebooks that are releasing on October 1st that you'll get access to all of those if you purchase today. And then after that, they're actually going to be sold separately and individually. So you get access to all of these with today's purchase. So you get what is my child's unique learning style? So I help you, I talk about the different types of learning that a child can do, how they learn and how learning is processed in their brain. And I help you, there's a little quiz in there to help you discover where your child falls. And then I talk about different approaches to teaching and learning, different philosophies that can help you develop ways to kind of reach your child based on their learning style. And this can go as far as like setting up the learning space to match your child's learning style as well. Stuck Inside is another one that I'm releasing, which is 30 indoor activities to kind of engage your child for those moments when you are stuck inside and you can't go outdoors. It's sort of these quick activities that you can grab when you've got like some cabin fever there, some things that you can do right away that don't require a lot of materials or any materials at all, to kind of engage and delight your child. And then Preschoolers Cook is another one. Again, with that, my passion is, that developing those healthy eating habits. So this is 30 recipes that are healthy and kid-friendly that your child can, help do on their own or with very little help from you. And it's just 30 activities separate from the ones that are in the theme. So at that point, you'd have 50 kid-friendly activities. And then the last bonus that you get is a fantastic one that access to this is actually going to be taken away pretty soon. So this is a bonus that you need to act on now. But this is a good friend of mine, Christina. She runs the Hippie Homemaker blog. She's actually using my program with her son this year. And he's 5, and she and I were talking. She's an herbalist by trade, and she and I were chatting, and she was saying how she really wanted to find a way to bring herbal learning into what she was teaching her child because, he was very interested in what she was doing. Naturally, she works from home as an herbalist, and she wanted to be able to bring that knowledge to him in a child-friendly way. So she decided to create this very brilliant program that she's releasing over the next year. She's released the first part of it already, and it's the second one's coming out this week. And it's a story, like an adventure story, where pieces are released every other week. And with each new part of the story, she's adding a new herb to the little chapter or module. So you'll get, this beautiful continued story, almost like a Waldorf-style story of these a brother and sister who are on a journey in these woods to help rescue and save their grandmother, and they have to go on this adventure to find these specific herbs to help her out. And so, each part of the story develops this new herb and this new part of the story, and you'll get like information on growing the herb and using it, recipes and activities. She's having a local artist design coloring pages to go inside each of the chapters. So this is a fantastic herbal learning course that she's putting together over the course of the next year, and you get free access to that today if you purchase with the curriculum. So how you can get access to that today is it is $149 is how it will retail on my website. I'm running a special price right now of $89 since I'm still working on some of those bonuses basically, and that expires October 1st. Since you took the time to be on the webinar with me today, I'm running a special webinar price of $77, and I'm going to put the link for you there. You might be able to click directly on the page. If not, bit.ly/preschool, CFB preschool is how you can get over there in the chat. I put it in the chat box there so you can click over. But if you buy before the end of the webinar, you get the entire program and all of the bonuses that I mentioned for only $77. So you get that extra, bonus just for joining me today. And this is being recorded, and you'll get a replay in your email. So if you're watching this via replay, that $77 price is not available anymore. But you can still get it for that $89. But if you're here today, you get that $77 bonus price just by ordering for the end of the webinar. So what I do want to do now, I have a lot of good questions already in the chat box there. So I want to do a Q&A with you. Join that chat box over there. Ask me any questions that you have about the materials that I talked about today in the learning space or the program itself. I'm going to leave this up here for you to see how you can get that program there. Again, the link is in the chat box. And we'll keep going here with some questions. We'll probably keep the webinar going for about 10 more minutes. So it gives you that chance to snag that bonus price of $77 now. So back to the question about themes and Reggio Emilia. So a lot of you are joining me from the Reggio Emilia group, and that is a lot of the theory that I follow the most, or I guess it's an approach, not a philosophy, but a lot of what I talked about today with setting up the engaging learning spaces is from the Reggio Emilia approach. So if you're not familiar with that, or you're joining me for somewhere else, definitely look into the Reggio Emilia approach. Now, you say that Reggio does not like themes, and I do agree with you. The Reggio Emilia approach is very much about following the child's interests completely. So I set this up with that in mind, because I agree with that and I believe you that the Reggio Emilia approach doesn't include themes. However, our children do think in terms of themes. The way that we segment information in our brains, it is thematic, it's compartmentalized. And what I wanted to be able to create was for anybody, parents, teachers who agree with this approach of learning for their children, to allow them to, kind of lead their thinking. I wanted them to have a place that they could go to access information and activities and literature resources right away based on their child's interests. So the way that I set up this program, it is not set up in a way that you have to follow it like a lesson plan. That's not the point of this. It's 20 themes that are completely independent of one another. They, the tree theme doesn't build on the rocks theme, and you don't have to go through everything in the program. So basically what this is my son recently developed, we just moved to the Pacific Northwest, and one of the things here, there's snails and slugs everywhere. So he developed this huge interest in bugs and slugs and snails and all of the new critters that he was finding. So I could open immediately to the bugs theme and pull out, we went and we got, the books on that list, and I was able to pull out these activities that engaged his understanding and his interests right away. And I didn't have to, I didn't want everybody to have to take those interests and run to Pinterest or run to Google and try to come up with all of these things on the fly. I wanted to have it available for them. So I included these 20 themes that sort of incorporated all of those natural questions that a child might have about nature so that they could access those activities right away. So it's not a theme in the traditional education sense of it. You know, you have to follow a lesson plan, but it's more of a theme based so that the parents or the teachers could kind of access that information from the specific theme right away. So I hope that answers your question there about the themes. It's not really in the traditional sense. It's more in the way the knowledge is organized. So Lindsay says, now I know what to do with the weird space in my backyard. I can't wait to get started. Thanks for sharing. And that's exactly what I wanted to do, Lindsay. I wanted you to be able to look at a space that you had that, maybe you were waiting for a big Pinterest inspiration or something, but it doesn't have to be that. Give your child some scoop tools and some water and plants, and you can have that right away. Caitlin says, first of all, do you rotate toys and activities outdoors? And then do you have any suggestions on having plants inside around toddlers? My group is very into dumping out bins right now. I would like to have plants at their level, but I'm stumped about how to have this in their environment in a positive way without them dumping them. Okay, so for your first question, because those are two different questions. So do I rotate toys and activities outdoors? With my outdoor activities, I rotate seasonally. So like in the summer, I have a lot of the like balls and wheeled toys outside. But as far as the way that I rotate indoors, no, it's not quite the same. I do the outdoor toys they kind of have access to all the time. Most of what we use outdoors is all nature-based. It's loose parts that we gather on nature walks. So I will rotate those out when they're old or broken, like broken pine cones or whatever. I'll rotate those out. I kind of clean those out that way. But I don't rotate, I don't have bins that I move in and out, I think is what you're referring to. So that no, the answer to that basically is no. I rotate seasonally, but that's about it. And then do you have suggestions on plants inside around toddlers? So children are going to dump things, especially at that young age. They dump out bins. So I would say that to take away that, how do I want to say this? So to avoid them maybe dumping plants, I would recommend giving them things that they can dump. So so that they're not inclined to dump the plants. And, depending on the age of your children, they might be able to understand that the plant needs to have its dirt to live. So you can't dump the plant, but you can dump this bucket of dirt, or you can dump this bowl of rocks or whatever. So still giving them access to things that they can dump out and scoop and move and pour will actually hopefully deter them from dumping some of those other things. And then I recommend, again, always having plants that the child can access freely. Succulents are a good one to have because even if the child dumps them, it's really, really hard to kill a succulent plant. You can go without watering it for weeks. So those are things that I recommend having because, I try not to get like spiny ones or whatever, but those are really good because, again, there's not really much a child could do to hurt that kind of plant. I love growing herbs in a child space because then they're great for imaginative play. So if the child, if we're growing lavender or cilantro or parsley or dill, those are all things that sprout really easily and they're easy to grow inside. So, we use recycled containers and we grow those around maybe where some of the kitchen toys might be. And those are great for cooking with, imaginative cooking, imaginative play. And again, it's really hard to kind of hurt some of those plants. But in general, don't just sort of, you really want to just give them plants that are easy to replace, I guess, if you have children that are dumping. But generally, if you provide a child, if they have something that they're really into, like dumping or throwing, providing them with a safe way that they can do that will deter them from doing it in a way that they shouldn't. So how do I incorporate this into a plastic early childhood center, which is in a building with limited natural light? So I'm guessing that you might not have access to outdoor space there is what you're saying. So how can you incorporate some of these natural elements into an early childhood center that's very plastic? So the first thing that I would definitely recommend, Jane, your name is familiar, and I think you might be in my Nature Hack Challenge. So that's some of the stuff we've been talking about. If you're not, get on the wait list for that because that would help you tremendously. But the first thing that I would recommend doing there, because generally in spaces like that are very, early childhood centers that are specifically run like by the public, they tend to get donations from people to kind of fill their spaces. And unfortunately, those donations do tend to be a lot of those like plastic pieces or those loud, singy, light up types of toys that don't promote imaginative thinking. So the first thing that I would really recommend doing is going through and sort of cycling out some of that to sort of limit what the children have access to all the time. So toy rotation is a great way to kind of combat that very plastic feel. If you take a lot of those things away and sort of rotate them out by week, maybe, you get that the children are going to be more engaged with it when it does come out to them, and it's going to take away a lot of that clutter and overwhelm that the child is going to feel if they're kind of walking into, like I said, that avalanche of plastic toys. And then bringing in as much natural elements as you can. So maybe take away a shelf where you have a lot of plastic toys, take those away, either get rid of them or put them in toy rotation, and replace that shelf with a basket of different loose parts. So like, it's autumn right now where I live, so maybe put in like a basket of cinnamon sticks and rocks, big rocks, and some pine cones, and sort of see how the children play with those elements. And I bet you'd be very surprised to see a change in the way that a child plays. And then you mentioned having limited natural light. So one of the biggest tips with adding more natural light to a space is using mirrors. So if you have mirrors that you can kind of use in the space to bounce the light around, that makes a big difference in how much natural light comes into the space. So even if you only have a small window or a few windows, adding some mirrors on the opposite side of where those mirrors are hitting or where that light is hitting will bounce the light all around the room. And I even like to include mirrors like down at the child's level, so like propped up behind a table where they're working, or propped up on the floor behind a building center, or even directly on the table or floor and having the child work on top of it, because it adds a whole new level of creative thinking when the child can see, so if you have it propped behind a table, the child can see the backside of their work. Or if it's on the floor, the child can see from the bottom of what they're building. So it adds a whole new element there. And then also just trying to replace maybe those fluorescent lights. Overhead fluorescent lights, I always encourage getting rid of those or keeping them off as much as possible, because that fluorescent lighting really is harmful to the way a child learns and sees. So if you can replace any of those overhead lights with maybe like twinkle lights, it's a very soft glow, or if you have to use lamps, put them down at a child's level so that the direct light is shining below the child's eye level. So like the base of the lampshade, for example, should be down below their eyes or at their eyes or lower. Excuse me, I'm running out of voice here trying to answer your questions. But I hope that answers your question. So trying to bring in mirrors and then soft lighting if you can, and then trying to find ways that brighten up the space. So, I don't know without looking at pictures of your space, but like if you have really dark floors or dark rugs, throwing a white rug or a really light colored area rug on top of that dark space will brighten up and kind of bounce that natural light around significantly. Lighter colored walls, removing any window treatments that you might have just on those small, I'm guessing you have just small, and you said limited natural light, so I'm guessing you have small windows. So removing those window treatments and opening up that space as much as possible is another good tip that I have there. But again, if you're not already in my Nature Hack Challenge, get on the wait list for that. That link was up there a little further. Are there any other questions? These are great questions so far. I'm really thankful. I'm in your other program. Okay, great. Yeah, I thought your name was familiar. Sorry about that. But yeah, so try to implement as many of those tips as possible. But yeah, if you're in a very, very plastic space, I would definitely recommend toy rotation and thinking about removing a lot of those toys that maybe don't promote creative thinking. And that can be a challenge sometimes, I know, in those kind of instances with maybe parents who don't quite understand yet or aren't familiar with some of these approaches. So you might have to do some, you might have to teach a little bit to people that you're working with or the parents from the program and explain why, having too much is actually overwhelming for a child. So having a very simple space is better. Okay, another question, Caitlin says, do you have other suggestions of loose parts for inside? I'm thinking about our play kitchen in particular. I have chestnuts and we'll be adding cinnamon sticks, thanks. So I really like using seasonal things. So if you have the opportunity to take the child or the children, I'm guessing that you obviously you have childcare, so you have a couple of children. So I don't know what your, options are for going outside with the kids. But I really love and recommend taking the children on nature walks and allowing them to bring things back with them. You have to set ground rules, no living things maybe, but bringing in those things that the children have like an ownership of. So if they can go out and gather acorns or pine cones or twigs, really you're going to have to think outside the box a little bit in terms of what you bring. So so you're talking about your play kitchen. So you said chestnuts and cinnamon sticks because your brain goes right to, as an adult, we compartmentalize. I mentioned that compartmentalized thinking. So as an adult, we think kitchen. So I need food things like chestnuts and cinnamon sticks. But to a child, they haven't compartmentalized kitchen yet completely. So it can be anything for them, right? So just because it's in a kitchen setting doesn't mean it has to be a kitchen type thing. So bring in pine cones, bring in some twigs, bring in some changing leaves. Some example, if you live somewhere where autumn is in full swing right now, bring in green leaves and yellow leaves and red leaves and brown leaves, and so your child can see that that change that's happening right now. Challenge with other teachers and directors. Yeah, absolutely. So you're gonna have to sort of combat that and sort of bring as much knowledge as you can. Feel free to print out my emails that I'm sending and take them in and let them read them. I'd love to have more people kind of getting on this bandwagon of understanding, bringing nature into the children. But yeah, so back to your question, Caitlin, of bringing in those loose parts. So really anything goes. And maybe, to keep with that food theme, also keeping that seasonal. So throw some apples in there, maybe some mini pumpkins. Now's a really good time to do something like that. Some squash, decorative squash, acorn squash. And those are things that are really easy to access right now. So like Indian corn, corn kernels, setting up like sensory bins over there. So with like some popcorn kernels and filling those with scoops. All kinds of great things. I love doing, I know we talked about themes, but I love doing things seasonally because it really makes a difference in how the child is learning about what's going on outdoors for them. So I hope that gives you some more ideas there as well. But if you have an opportunity to take the children outside and let them gather on their own, that's a really good way to kind of grow your loose parts play without you having to do all of the work of gathering things. So if there are no other questions, I'm going to go ahead and mute my microphone. Again, you can get this entire program and all of those bonuses if you order before the end of the webinar for $77. And I did have some questions about whether this is specifically for homeschoolers or for use in a classroom, and it is not specific to either one of those. I have plenty of people using it at home with their individual children, and I have people that have purchased it for use in a classroom or with a director has purchased it for all of their teachers. It's really, I wanted to have something put together to take the work out of it for the parents and the teachers to be able to, create those meaningful learning experiences for their children and, to have access to all of the things that they would need, all of those ideas right away. So as soon as the child shows interest in something, they have somewhere where they can go and, set up really meaningful activities for their children to kind of promote that natural wonder of the world around them. So that was my mission in creating this and sharing it with you. Again, you get all of those bonuses. I'm going to go back and share them with you one more time here. Excuse me. So you get access to that free private Facebook group where other members of the program are using and sharing all of their ideas. We're building off of these themes all the time, all of these extra things that people are doing. I have individual documents inside the Facebook group where people are sharing, the specific things that they're adding on to the program. You get all of those ebooks that release October 1st, and they will not be available as part of this package anymore after that. So if those are interesting to you, get the program now because you'll get them free. Otherwise, they will be a separate purchase after October 1st. And then also with this herbal learning course, that bonus will not be available for much longer either. And you get free access to that full program over the next year, and then you'll have it forever. And that is an incredible, incredible program. My 4-year-old is in love with the first part of the story already, and he's asked me to read it to him 100 times. It's a fantastic fantasy wonderful story. And again, to get that is bit.ly/CFB preschool. I'm going to go ahead and type that into the chat box for you again here. It's kind of buried by my questions. But I am going to go ahead and mute the microphone. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm going to leave the chat box open for probably another 5 minutes or so. So if something comes to you and you have a question, I'll engage with you over there. There's a couple of questions I didn't get to, so I'll try to answer those in the chat box for you now. But if you have any questions after this webinar, please get in touch with me. You can join the private Facebook group that I linked to at the very beginning. I'm in there frequently. And then if you're watching this through the replay, you can still access this program, bit.ly/preschool for $89 after the end of the webinar. Again, if you're here live with me, you can get that for $77 now before the end of the program. So again, thank you for taking the time today to engage with me and chat with me and let me share my ideas with you. I know I went over the time a little bit, but this was a lot of fun. So thank you so much, and have a wonderful day.